Moving on to another, what about the Silver Fangs? What can be the new role slash niche if they lose their leadership thing? Personally, I would not make them lose leadership. As I said in the Vision episode that released today, I would let them in power in America. I would make them lose leadership in Europe, because that's, according to me, literally where this setting was going. When Werewolf ended, the Margrave Konietzko was taken over Europe, essentially. The tribes were one by one falling behind him and following him. He had already 3 or 4 tribes out of the 13 that were in Europe that were with him. So move the setting along 20 years, it's not a stretch to think that people are now following the Shadow Lords in Europe. I think it is inevitable unless someone assassinates Konietzko, which could happen too. So what I see for the Silver Fang would be a bit of an identity crisis, I guess, in a certain way. Also a search for themselves. They would be the tribe that used to think that they were the best by default, that they were the ones who were supposed to lead just because Falcon said so. You've got the crown, so you're the leaders. And that's a bunch of hogwash, essentially. It doesn't mean much of anything. Also, they lost the crown for a long time. They just found it back with Albrecht, so their claim to leadership not that great. And the first thing they did when they were given leadership was get cursed by Luna. So seriously, they didn't do much. Throughout history, the history of the Garou are littered with the failure of the that's actually a pretty cool thing. Because I did a lot of research on the Silver Fang for a game I ran that happened in partly in Russia, partly in Scandinavia. And when you look at it, 90% of the history of the Silver Fang are the history of their repeated failures. They're supposed to be these great heroes, but pretty much every tragedy is pretty much every big failure in the history of the Garou can be traced back to some Silver Fang who thought too highly of himself, imagined a slight somewhere where there was none, and decided to start a war against the Australian tribe just because. Oftentimes, because they were manipulated, their egos were manipulated by minions of the worm. That happened like 3 times in the history of the Garou, and there were many other times where their leadership failed, like when they wiped out the Kara, which were the saber-tooth shifters. And that's why they got cursed, by the way. Luna was pissed that they did that, and she cursed them. But you've got the other side of that equation. The Silver Fang are at their best and brightest when things are at their worst. When things go really, really bad, and the Garou Nation really needs a hero now, that's usually when a Silver Fang gets up and saves the day. They're at their brightest when it is darkest. That has happened several times in their history as well. A great, great example of that is Queen Tamar Dvarovich. She is from Russia. And you might be aware, you know enough about the World of Darkness, so I'm sure you know about there was, for a long time, there was something known as the Curtain, the Iron Curtain, that was brought up by the Baba Yaga, which was she's an Iktuku, she's a 4th generation Nosferatu, extremely powerful. That's one version of it, though. Of course, there's our other interpretation of who she is in the World of Darkness. There's a lot of versions of what she is, who she is, what she represents, and how she got killed. There are two or three variations, just like Rasputin has a lot of variations as well. But the most commonly accepted-ish one is that she was a fourth generation Niktuku Nosferatu that also happened to be the representation of, sort of like, for example, the Wolf Mother is to the Pushta, she is that to Russia. In some of the books anyway, it's heavily implied that that's what she is. So that's why she has the power that she has in terms of sorcery and things like that, and she was able to bring up the Iron Curtain, which sealed off Russia from the rest of the world. That affected pretty much any supernatural creatures. They could no longer leave Russia physically or spiritually. Like moon bridges, they didn't work anymore. And that lasted for several years. I even want to say several decades. My memory is failing me right now, but it lasted for a very long time. A single werewolf was able to leave that Iron Veil with some umbral shenanigan. His name was Arcady. And he made his way to America to try and ask for the help of the American werewolves. And what happened is that he tried to steal the Silver Crown and make himself the leader of the Garus so that he could make sure to save his country, to make sure that he would be able to force the Garu nation to come and help the Russians. I'll spare you the details, but it didn't help. It didn't end the way he wanted, let's just say. But in the meantime, what happened inside the curtain is that when things were at their worst, there were black spiral dancers all over the place claiming Karen's left and right, following the leadership of the Baba Yaga. The werewolves were losing. There's even, I think, an entire house of Silver Fang that got wiped out. But even that is an example of Silver Fang's success. While things were at their worst, this house sacrificed themselves so that others could continue having a fighting chance. And at the end of the day, it wasn't werewolves that killed the Baba Yaga. Well, yes, in some version, but widely accepted that she was actually betrayed by some of her own. But it was, at the end of the day, Queen Tavarit that rose up and had the leadership and the presence required to unify a previously very ununified Russian Garu nation. They rallied behind her, and her father, I believe, even behind her. He sacrificed himself to save a lot of people, and she did the same. She didn't sacrifice herself, but she sacrificed a lot to get shit done, and it was successful. She made a name for herself very quickly, and she became the face of Russia. She became the person that everyone would die for, that werewolves would not hesitate to fight beside her. She was essential, not in winning, but in surviving. If she had not been there, the Garu in Russia, which represents 1/16 of the entire planet, they would all be dead today if Tamar Varevich had not managed to unify them behind her and inspire them to keep fighting even when all hope was lost. Even when Arcady didn't come back with the backup, I'm sure a lot of them lost hope, of course, but many more kept fighting because they rallied behind her. So where am I going with this in terms of the Silver Fang? I want things to go dark. I want things to be bad. I want the situation to be as it is now, I guess, because the werewolves are supposed to be losing, but we don't really feel that all that much, right? I want to be able to, A, feel that things are going bad, and B, I want things to be bad specifically for the Silver Fangs. I want them to be losing control and leadership of the Garu nation, or at the very least Europe, and therefore America try to save face, that sort of thing, so that things are bad enough that finally the Silver Fang are actually given a chance to shine like they usually do. When things are going well and they're saying, yeah, we're cool, follow us, it doesn't work, because these are the Silver Fangs that are just freaking pricks, that don't lead by examples, and that deserve to be butt kicked. But when things are terrible, that's when you have a Silver Fang that isn't going to tell you, yeah, follow me because I'm cool. That's when you have a Silver Fang that is going to rise up and do that what must be done and get shit done. And those are the heroic Silver Fangs that I like. And those are the Silver Fangs that we deserve to have in 5th edition. But we're not going to have that if they're the top dogs, as they usually are, despite the fact that they don't deserve to be right now. I hope that answers your question.